How you get, everybody? Welcome to the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. All things Chicago Cubs in under 10 minutes. National League Central seeing a bit of a shakeup recently, but the Cubs remain on top. Latest All-Star ballot standings just came out. We'll talk about where Cubs players are, and a league-wide crackdown on substances gets underway tonight. We're talking about pitching substances. More on that shortly. Here we are, June 21st, halfway through the season, or close to it. The halfway point is just ahead of us, and the Cubs are leading the National League Central. That despite a bumpy week. The last 10 days, really, have been pretty tough. And a serious shakeup in the standings. Cubs are 40-32, red hot from late April through early June. Currently tied atop the National League Central with the Milwaukee Brewers. Both teams 40-32. St. Louis was leading the way not long ago. They have had a real tough month of June. A lot of injuries to the starting rotation. Meanwhile, the Cincinnati Reds have turned it on. I like them coming into the season. Cards and Reds tied for third in the National League Central, 4 games back. Cubs are the only team in the National League Central right now with a positive run differential. They have scored 22 runs more than they have allowed. That gap is only about half of what it was just 72 hours ago. A tough weekend for the Cubs at Wrigley Field, where the Cubs have been so amazingly solid this year. Cubs dropped 2 of 3 to the Miami Marlins. Now, every team, every year, is going to have hot and cold streaks, but as we approach the halfway point of this season, there are very clear trends in sight. First, Cubs offense is based on the home run. We've seen many times this year where situational hitting has come up big, and that's been nice, and that's been very different than the last couple of years. But ultimately, it still comes down to the home run when you're talking about the Chicago Cubs offense. And with the Cubs in so many games, not just recently, but throughout the year, their only scoring comes via the home run. Looking at the last 10 games, Cubs have scored 3 or more runs just 3 times. They won 2 of those 3 contests. But in that stretch, the team is still 5-5, which leads us to trend number 2. The bullpen is simply amazing. By most measures, the best bullpen in the league, or at least among the league leaders. They are also among the most worked in terms of innings pitched. When the Cubs lead late, Andrew Chafin and Craig Kimbrell back-to-back out of the bullpen. They've been essentially lights out on almost every occasion. Really, really solid. Trend number 3, starters need to go longer into games. Just mentioned Cubs bullpen among the leaders in the majors in innings pitched due to all these early exits by Cubs starters. Bullpen is pitching half the game or more in many cases, and that is a challenge. Even though they've held it together so far, almost to the halfway point of the season, you got to keep those arms fresh. The All-Star game in Colorado is quickly approaching. Cubs have several players destined to advance to Phase 2 of the All-Star vote. The top 3 vote-getters at each position and the top 9 outfielders advance to the second phase of voting. From there, the starters are determined by Phase 2 of the fan vote. Pitchers and backup players determined by the league and a player vote. And if we take a look at the voting of where Cubs players are, this update just released a couple hours ago. Anthony Rizzo is currently 3rd in the National League vote at first base. He's got 13% of the vote behind the Dodgers' Max Muncy and his pal in Atlanta, Freddie Freeman. At 2nd, Nico Horner is 4th, right behind Gavin Lux of the Dodgers. I think they said the gap was around 30,000 votes, and that theoretically is doable, to overcome that gap in the next 3.5 days or so. Unsure if that's going to be the case since Nico has been hurt the last couple of years, or last couple of weeks, I should say. Don't know if Nico's going to have the momentum to overcome Lux, but I would say it's pretty impressive, though, that Nico Horner is 4th for no longer than he's been playing. Now, Javi Baez, undoubtedly very popular at shortstop. He's got 15% of the vote at shortstop. That's 2nd behind Fernando Tatis Jr., who I think is going to be your National League starting shortstop. By those numbers, there's no doubt, but obviously Javi will make it in as a backup. Chris Bryant is way out in front in the third base vote. Bryant pretty much doubles up the guy right behind him, which is Nolan Arenado in St. Louis. And then behind the plate, Wilson Contreras has 13% of the catcher vote. Buster Posey way out in front And then Yadier Molina in St. Louis, and then Contreras is third. In the outfield, Jock Peterson is in the top 9. He is 7th right now with 3% of the vote. Jason Hayward and Ian Happ are just outside the top 9. They are 10th and 11th, respectively. Fan voting, Phase 1, continues through Thursday at 4 Eastern. Results announced on Sunday, and then you'll have 4 days of Phase 2 voting ending July 1 at 2 Eastern. Full all-star rosters announced later that day. You can vote at MLB.com. Go to any team website, including Cubs.com, or I think you can vote on any of the MLB apps like At Bat and the Ballpark app. Cubs with good representation at this point. Let's talk injuries real quick. They are numerous all over the league, but especially with the Cubs. There were a dozen guys on the injured list a couple of weeks ago. Not as many now as Jason Hayward and Jake Marisnick have come back from the injured list. Alec Mills is back too. He's already seen some time. Nico Horner said to be progressing and getting close, but he's not back in action just yet. Matt Duffy remains sidelined. Jose Lobaton now getting some action behind home plate as the backup to Wilson Contreras. Wilson has been eating up a lot of innings. I think he's first or second in Major League Baseball in innings caught, but he still needs a break. Catching is hard, even for a young guy like Wilson Contreras, who wants to be in the lineup every day, but even he has admitted, I need a day off from time to time. Cubs have had multiple backup catchers get injured, so Jose Lobaton is the latest to see action behind home plate for the Cubs on occasion. And Patrick Wisdom continues to excite at third. He had 8 home runs in his first 10 starts. He's now got 9 home runs. That's the same number as Anthony Rizzo. It is amazing. This and that, our look at news and notes from around Major League Baseball. Tampa Bay Rays calling up Wander Franco. He's the top prospect of Major League Baseball, expected to join the team Tuesday night. He's long been a shortstop, but has played a number of positions in the past year and a half as he's made his way through the Tampa Bay organization. Rays were the hottest team in baseball in May. They've now dropped 6 in a row, and their ace Tyler Glasnow is also out. So the Rays could use a spark. Major League Baseball cracking down on pitchers using foreign substances. This crackdown is set to begin with the games tonight. Starting pitchers will be subject to at least one mandatory check each time out. Umpires can check pitchers at any time that they want during a game. Violation will yield an ejection and a 10-game suspension. Catchers will also be checked periodically, and rosin bags are still okay. Don't get the wrong idea. Those are still part of the game, but increased scrutiny of those games, or of those bags. I believe the bags have to be submitted for a visual inspection and final approval prior to the game. And we'll see exactly how everything plays out in the coming days. Yankees ended their game yesterday by turning a triple play. It's the first time a game has ended via triple play since 2009 when the Phillies did that against the Mets. Yesterday's triple play, also the third triple play turned this season by the Yankees. No one has done that since the 2016 White Sox. And Kyle Schwarber turning it on this weekend in D.C., the Nationals left fielder with 3 home runs yesterday, 5 in his last 2 games. Nats, by the way, are heating up, winners of 9 of their last 12. Next up for the Chicago Cubs, a quick 2-game set with the Cleveland Indians at Wrigley Field. Tonight and tomorrow, 8:05 Eastern, first pitch both nights on Marquee Sports Network. Aaron Savali versus Adbert Alzolay, the pitching matchup tonight. Savali 10-2 on the year. He's going to be tough. Alzolay making his first start back from the injured list. No issues when he had a throwing session on Saturday. Tomorrow night, Eli Morgan versus Kyle Hendricks. Morgan with limited experience so far this season with Cleveland, while Hendricks is aiming for his 10th win of the year. His April was disastrous, yet here we are, Kyle Hendricks with a possibility of 11 wins through June. And that's it for this episode of the Bricks and Bleachers podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Follow us at Bricks Bleachers on Twitter. Visit bricksandbleachers.com. And be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you enjoy your podcasts. This is the Bricks and Bleachers podcast.